Hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time on Doctor Who Classic we had The Smugglers. What was that one about?
Well, it was I'm guessing, early 1600s, down in far southwest England. You had some pirates who were trying to cash in on a local squire's scam of getting stuff in, and the doctor and everybody came in and who are they again? Ben and Polly. Ben and Polly's first real adventure, they caught on very quickly on how to do it. Kind of got into character, got away with it for a while. And then, if I recall correctly, the Puritan tax collector, the inland revenue man, comes in and sorts it all out, and off they flew.
Yep, pretty much. It was a historical that didn't have anyone specifically historical, so which kind of left it a bit more open. And there was a whole conflict between the militia and the pirates, and the Doctor actually went in and tried to intervene, which was interesting. It's a interesting step for his character. And speaking of interesting steps for his character, I think we're about to take an interesting step for his character.
The end of the era.
Yep, this is the, at least, we're, let's say, 99.9% sure that this is the end of the first Doctor's era. So, yeah, this will be interesting, because I don't think it's treated with, real big pomp and circumstance like in the modern era. So I think it's just going to happen. I think Ben and Polly are woefully unprepared for it. And maybe the only companion that could have been prepared for it may be Susan. Yeah. But that's about it. Everyone else, they would probably still be freaked out. But, this is technically Ben and Polly's third adventure with the Doctor. So
now, personally speaking, again, having watched Doctor Who from the very beginning back in 1963, I would have left just before this happened. Right, we left to come back to the United States in June of '63, and this would have been somewhere just a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months after that. And what's odd is that although I vaguely recall some American TV programs showing on British TV, we did not get British TV programs in the United States. And it wouldn't be until 1975 or 1976 when I would become aware that Doctor Who had kept going all this time, because, again, a friend of mine from graduate school and college was a huge fan of Tom Baker's, and she somehow mentioned it, and I went, "Oh yeah, I used to watch Doctor Who." And she went, "How did you do that?" I went, "Well, because I lived in England," and she didn't know that I was a Hartnell fan, and I didn't know that Doctor Who had survived. Anyway, so From that point on, I tried to watch as much of Tom Baker as I could, but again, he was on Saturday night at 10:30 on PBS, so it was very difficult for me to do anything, especially when I was either performing or directing, because we're out late on performance night. So I didn't watch it again probably after that until I saw that you were kind of getting interested in it. I saw maybe a little bit, like one or two episodes of David Tennant and a couple of Matt Smith. But then again, not until you started doing it and we came back and doing it, we did our little survey of all 11 Doctors at the time.
Right.
So this is not only the end of an era for Hartnell, but it's kind of the end of the era for me as well.
Yeah, that was the thing. When I first, and this is going back way early when I was in, I had just finished the second season of Modern Doctor Who. For reference, in case anyone doesn't know, I'm on season 10 now. This was mid-2018. Yeah. And, the schedule with Doctor Who and the spin-off Torchwood, I had to sort of mix things up a bit. So we threw in the first classic episode, and I brought you on because I knew you had watched the episodes when they aired. So that's the thing, is that I brought you on because you had seen those episodes. But now we're past the point where you have seen episodes, so now we're really just kind of going in blind.
Yeah.
So
I think he's trying to say he's about to fire me.
Well, no. Are you kidding? Views would plummet if that happened. So.
Well, that's always nice to hear.
Yeah.
He would do fine by himself, but I enjoy doing this.
So. Now, I do wonder, did you know that they had changed actors?
No. Again, If there was anything at all, it would have been in some of the science fiction fan magazines. But when I came back to the United States, even though I read them religiously over in Europe, it was like Famous Monsters of Filmland, and it was more film oriented than anything. And I don't recall seeing anything at all about Doctor Who. Oh, of course, they weren't doing Star Trek yet or anything like that. This was all about the Hammer films with Christopher Lee and some of the others.
Yeah.
What's his name that played the Doctor in the movies?
Peter Cushing.
Peter Cushing, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and Vincent Price and Peter Lorre and some of the others, Boris Karloff. So, yeah, I don't remember seeing or hearing anything at all again about Doctor Who until, again, would have been at the earliest summer of 75.
And I think... I'm trying to think if, like, how early in Tom Baker's run that would have been. The problem is Tom Baker's run goes on forever.
Yeah.
It's like 8 seasons or something.
Well,
so.
it probably wasn't very early because, again, my friend Sandy had been watching him for some time. And then she, again, just one of those off the cuff said, "Oh, I happened to watch this program called Doctor Who," and I went, "Oh yeah, I used to watch that." And she went,
"Yeah,
how could you have watched that?" I said, "Oh well, I watched it when it first came out back in '63." So
yeah, so you had to get up to speed that not only was Hartnell not on the show anymore, but they had 3 other guys up to Tom Baker,
and that it was 12, 13 years later, and
yeah.
I had never heard of a program other than like Gunsmoke that had lasted that long.
Yeah, and by that time it was in color too. So, anyway, so we are on to the 10th planet. The first 3 episodes are all complete. Part 4 is animated, which it's better than Recon's,
yeah.
but yeah, Part 4 is animated, and I actually think the next serial is also animated too. So we better get used to these.
Now, I have seen somewhere on like YouTube that they actually have the momentary clip of Hartnell's face being replaced by Troughton's. Now, are they going to animate that, or are they going to show that actual?
I think it might just be animated. Now, there was actually someone who offered to give me a version that may, I guess, contain the clip of Hartnell turning into Troughton, but I wasn't sure, like, okay, I don't know how much this, like, changes anything, or if it's just, that one tiny clip. So I elected to go for just the normal version that we have.
Okay.
Sorry, man, if you're out there, you're watching this. I'm sorry that we're not watching that specific version. Though thank you for the offer.
But yeah, the clip that I saw is like 10 seconds. It just shows Hartnell's face, kind of glowing, and then when the glow subsides, it's Troughton, and that's the entire clip.
Yeah. Well, and I think they may have also, when they did An Adventure in Space and Time, they may have actually like remade the Regeneration with the modern actors that they had. And I think they were actually they actually did a version of the second Doctor's regeneration into the third Doctor, because maybe that's like either that's lost or that's not a part of it or something. Like there's no clear transition, I guess. So they actually kept that actor, and they used I guess the writer for An Adventure in Space and Time was Mark Gatiss, who plays Mycroft on Sherlock, and he played John Pertwee, and they did that transition. But I don't know where that is, so... but yeah, we're watching just the normal animated one. Maybe we could look up the small clip of Hartnell becoming Troughton, but we can do that afterwards.
All right.
And probably once we do the discussion, we'll do a slight retrospective. Not a very long one, and certainly not as long as the one I had to do for Merlin, so... yeah. And with all of that being said, we should get started on the 10th planet. Here we go.
I do not remember that rocket at all. Most of the stuff that we saw in the 60s, of course, would have been like the Saturn V or the Atlas.
It was a new writer.
Yeah.
Will you take control now?
Williams coming in. Cosmic measurements are now complete. Are you ready to receive data?
Go ahead.
Okay, Blue, let him have it. Are you receiving it?
Is A1 okay?
Yeah, it's more like the capsules in 66 would have been, not quite as cramped as the old Mercury, but not as expansive as the stuff like on Star Trek and some of the other stuff we've seen here. Nice little set piece.
Yeah.
Well, you were at the South Pole.
Oh boy, Tito, get the CO. You're not gonna like it.
Get on!
Why don't you speak up? I'm Jet.
But when I do, you'd better have a good explanation.
I don't like your tone, sir.
And I don't like your face, nor your hair. Sergeant, bring him
That's
into
so
the
specific.
put him under guard in the observation room.
What do you mean?
Yeah, just take a peek there.
1986? Oh no, and I thought we'd be able to get home.
Yeah, we're still at sea.
Just 20 years off. He was so close.
Must all to work now.
What do you mean?
There's another planet out there.
Another
Yeah.
A 10th planet. Because we have 9 planets specifically.
Right.
All right, excuse me, my dear. Take this to your general, please.
Me? You crazy?
Very well, then take me to the general. I think perhaps I can help him.
Oh, I don't know.
Now, look here, Sergeant. This is urgent, I insist.
He's just immediately solved the problem.
Here's the medical girl.
It's interesting that the one guy is always slow because he's in space.
Come and have a look at these land masses.
masses? I don't see. See what you mean.
Upside
Now,
down.
doesn't that remind you of anything?
Hey, Ben! Look, that bit looks just like Malaysia!
Give over. This is unbelievable. That's surely Africa.
Yes, certainly, and that is Malaysia.
There must be some reflection of her.
She's so specific on Malaysia.
Now, you clearly know something more about the situation. Can you be more explicit?
Yes, sir, I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can. You see, millions of years ago, there was a twin planet to
Oh,
Earth
for
and...
heaven's sake.
Roger, Duke 4.
I love that guy's voice.
Let me know the moment you have any more information, General.
Those don't look right.
Sir, but there's one more
What
thing.
they're holding, that doesn't look like that's supposed to be held that way.
It is, again, mid-60s, that was a
Where did they come from?
almost portable phone because you didn't have to have the receiver and the set. It was the whole thing in one, and you dialed it from the bottom, if I recall correctly.
I don't know what
Please tell me this isn't the Daleks.
Those aren't the Daleks.
Definitely not Daleks. They're Cybermen.
I think they are the Cybermen.
What's going on?
Oh, what a disguise. Oh, they still have hands. I see they've gotten a lot more creative with their credits, too. All right, that's part 1. It's the introduction of the Cybermen.
Which, of course, I'm only familiar with because we saw them with Troughton in the episode that we did there, The Tomb of the Cybermen. And they are not quite as sophisticated as they were because
Yeah.
I don't know if that one guy he was the leader, but he's got that big thing on top of his head, and I don't remember them having that.
I mean, they had sort of something, but not that big.
Yeah.
The stuff on their bodies is also a little different. I think it's just it's 1966. We need to figure out something for robot men, and this is what they created. I mean, you also saw they just have normal hands. They don't have robotic hands, apparently. So this is a very interesting premise. First off, just the fact that this is the introduction of the Cybermen, which is really cool. But the 10th planet has just sort of appeared. It's the Earth, but it's upside down. I'm pretty sure that was an episode of Jimmy Neutron, but...
Yeah, but I think Cybermen came first.
Maybe.
Jimmy Neutron, probably not until the late 1990s, early 2000s, at best.
Yeah. But I do remember that episode. There was like an evil version of Earth that was just a ways away.
Nice thing here. 1986, they've talked about already having gone to the moon. But in 1966, we had not gone to the moon.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Apollo program was on hold because of the accident with Apollo 1. They had the launch pad fire that killed 3 of the astronauts. So that's kind of a, wishful thinking on their part.
Yeah.
Especially considering that it would be 3 more years before they would actually get the Apollo up and flying all the way to the moon. I think 8, 9, and 10. Well, 8 went to the moon. I know that because they circled around and then came back. Can't remember what 9 and 10 specifically did. I think one of them got to the moon, launched the lunar orbiter to make sure that it would fly, but then didn't actually land, and it wasn't until Apollo 11 in July of 69 that they landed.
It is interesting that they just chose, it's 1986. Okay, that's just an interesting sort of year. I mean, it's only 20 years off from when this is airing, so, and I guess it's just to show it's not too far into the future, but it is we're already a bit more advanced with space flight and stuff like that.
Well, of course, by 86 we had the I want to say the beginnings of the International Space Station. Of course, they'd always already done the Skylab and the some other small projects where people stayed in space for several weeks at a time, and of course the shuttle Challenger blew up in 86. So I mean, it's interesting to see how they predicted it versus where it actually went by 86.
Yeah. And it's also interesting that the Doctor knows what the 10th planet is. Yeah. And he started to go into it, but then obviously he's got to be interrupted by military man and stuff like that. So
I'm kind of surprised that when the kid, Ben,
yes.
he's so new, I don't even know his name yet.
Yeah.
When Ben said he was with the Royal Navy, the first thing they said was, why aren't you with your ship? I mean, certainly it would seem like if he is an actual member of the armed forces, that they would say, well, what are you doing here? Don't you know this is a secret? It's not a secret facility, but it's authorized entry, authorized personnel only sort of thing. So anyway, they're skipping over that just to kind of move this along, I'm guessing.
Yeah. I also like that when the other guys go out there, the Cybermen has put on the cloak as a disguise. That just was really silly, I feel like. Well, because at first I was like, wait, did they assimilate this guy and he immediately turned into Cybermen, but everything but his cloak? And it's like, no, this Cyberman literally just baited them and put on the cloak as a disguise. Clever. Weird, but clever.
Makes you wonder if they've got the first 3, what happened to the 4th one? Weren't these sold as lots, sold as cereals?
Yeah. You would think all 4 of them would be kept together. Oh, they're all putting on disguises. That's so hilarious.
Not like they don't have silver legs.
Yeah, silver legs, arm, a protruding torso. That guy's trying to cover it up.
Sergeant! That was an order! Take that man back to the office!
I can't believe those disguises worked as well as they did. Oh god, light!
Fried him.
It's the closest we've gotten to a ray beam.
Yes, eons ago the planets were twins. Then we drifted away from you on a journey to the edge of space. Now we have returned.
You were right, Doctor.
But who or
Just
what
drifted
are you?
away.
We are called Cybermen. On conclusion, you are wasting time. However, if you wish to contact them, I have no objection.
Sounds a little like the aliens from Galaxy Quest.
Yeah.
We cannot live with you. You're different. You've got no feelings.
Feelings? I do not understand that word.
Emotions, love, pride, hate, fear.
You will become like us.
Like you?
All right, that's the information, gentlemen. Now get cracking and establish contact with
Notice the framing. They've done a lot of the
Surely,
people
General.
in the foreground and
Get
the action in the
information
background.
through the computer.
Yeah.
And let me know when you've got
That's
it.
very 50s, 60s science fiction movie stuff.
Strong signal on the early warning, unidentified.
Well, identify it, man.
Yes, sir. There are hundreds of them, sir.
Hundreds of what?
Spaceships, sir! In formation!
Okay. I had the thought, is this like the earliest like planetary first contact that they've had so far?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Other than the meddling monk.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like,
Yeah.
like the whole world knows about it.
Yeah.
So, because I was trying to think, because we don't really have many sort of, I guess, contemporary stories like, it is in that sort of time, even though this is still 86. But like the closest would be like the Dalek invasion of Earth, but that was hundreds of years in the future.
Yeah.
So that's interesting that this is really the first time that the humans are aware of alien life. Of course, in a few episodes they'll say that half the world still denies it, which is a running thing that even in modern Doctor Who, when they have like a full Dalek invasion, 3 episodes later, Daleks don't exist. That's just a hoax. So
Wow, where have we heard that lately?
well, yeah. And this is a completely random thought that I had. You know who Ben sort of reminds me of? He kind of reminds me of PETA from the Hunger Games. He kind of looks like him.
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah. It's just a random thought that I had on this episode. So, yeah. I guess that's pretty much it. I still don't... Okay, so Mondas is a very interesting idea. It's like, okay, so this is a twin planet that somehow still developed technically the exact same as Earth because it's the same land formations and everything. And it just drifted off one day. Just left. But now it's apparently running out of energy. Okay, I guess maybe the core is dying or something, so it's coming back.
How did they get it to come back?
I don't know.
Yeah, see, they're not explaining a lot of this.
Yeah, it's like, it's come back and it's going to sap the energy from the Earth somehow, and then the Cybermen, they just happen to live there, so they're like, hey, your planet's gonna die. You can come live with us. You have to be us, but, you can come live with us at least. So, I mean, I guess technically the Cybermen aren't so hostile. I mean, yeah, they're hostile. They're taking out dudes when they don't obey and everything like that. And obviously, they want all the humans to be like them. But they did come and say, like, hey, your planet's going to die instead of ours. You can come bunk with us if you want to, though. So
yes, but that invariably in scenarios like this leads to, we are the superior race, you are the inferior race, you will become our slaves. I mean, that seems to be what they're setting up.
Well, that's always the interesting thing about the Cybermen, though, is that it is sort of, we are the superior race, but it's always, but we want you to be superior with us. But being superior means being us, specifically.
You will be assimilated.
Yeah, it's a weird sort of like, it's like the Borg. It's like, yeah, we are better than you. You have a chance to be better, but you're not going to like it, generally. But it would be for the best, So,
now, for all of the, science fiction framing of the shots and the, all this, that, and the other thing, have you noticed that there's a whole lot of talk, but not a lot of action?
Yeah, like, not a ton really happened. I mean, we met the Cybermen in this episode, but other than that,
there's
really
a whole lot of energy and shouting and this, that, and the other thing, and it's like 5 minutes worth of script and a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it does not move the way some of the others have.
Yeah, like, because I figured, like, well, okay, I thought Zeus 4 would end up landing on Mondas instead of Earth, and maybe they'd have to go get them. And maybe that'll happen now with the General Sun. But I also thought, well, okay, they could get there because they still have the ship that landed originally. So now that they've killed the Cybermen that landed, if you could just go, maybe the Doctor could figure out how to work it, get up to Mondas if you need to. But none of that has really happened in this episode.
Yeah.
So,
and 50 years of studying history, I've never heard the term Mondas used as a substitute for Earth.
yeah, some sort of ancient word for Earth.
Now, there is a French word, monde, M-O-N-D-E, and coming from the Latin mundo, meaning Earth. So, I mean, that may be what they're going for, but again, never heard Mondas used as Earth.
Yeah. So
Gaia, definitely. Terra. So.
Yeah.
Now, you also get the feeling that the Doctor has met the Cybermen before, but he hasn't actually said that.
Well, I mean, he at least knows of Mondas. So maybe he specifically... I don't know, maybe he doesn't know specifically about the Cybermen, but he knows that Mondas was the twin planet to Earth. However that works.
What's the matter, Doctor?
What's happened to him? Quick, do something quickly.
Yeah, he needs medical help. Quick. General!
Yes, what is it?
It's the doctor. He's passed out. He's ill.
I've got it onto my plate without worrying about him. Get him down to one of the cabins and look after him. You, give them a hand. Yes, sir. Coming through now, sir.
Oh no, his body has just decided to regenerate now.
Fine time he picks for a kick. Oh, come on, Polly, you must get back to the control
We
room.
can't leave him.
He seems all right. His pulse and breathing are normal.
I don't understand it. It just seems to be worn out.
Well, look, there's nothing we can do till the quack gets here anyway. Come on.
I mean, I know, we're kind of joking. It's like, oh, he's starting to regenerate already. It's like,
Now look, son.
but let's be honest, this is sort of par for the course for the first Doctor. He just sort of passes out every so often.
Seen anything? It's the doomsday weapon, mister. And rightly primed, it could split that planet in half. There are 2 or 3 at strategic positions around the globe. We have one of them, and the means of delivering it to Mondas.
Secretary Witness, sir.
Secretary? Yes, General.
Shades of Dr. Strangelove, the Doomsday Device.
By 86, was the Cold War over?
No, that would be another 3 years.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I couldn't remember.
Request permission, sir, to take...
No, General. You must take no precipitate action. This is quite out of the question.
Yes, sir.
Who created this bomb that can... One bomb blows up an entire planet.
Well, the idea behind it is once you have a doomsday device, then no one will attack you knowing that if you set it off, that they will die.
Right, gentlemen.
It's a mutually assured destruction, or MAD.
So far as the capsule is concerned, Dr. Bartley, you are going to program that bomb so that it hits Mondas at a time when my son's robot is taking them to the far side of the Earth.
But there are no guarantees of success.
I'm not arguing, Doctor.
They're coming in closer, sir.
Does anyone have authority to relieve this guy of command?
Second in command could do it.
Yeah.
Get him on our side.
Though, I mean, I don't blame him because the Doctor's explanation makes no sense.
Well,
I didn't make lots like that in 1966.
Air shaft over your head.
Wait a minute. I wonder where this leads to.
It's gonna turn to Die Hard.
Come out to the coast. Have a party. We'll have a few laughs.
It is technically December of 1986, so...
Because there's always a ventilator shaft into a room with toxic radiation.
Well...
But again, the average kid wouldn't have known that.
Well... Though I think they did say this part of part of it was, like, protected. Ventilation shaft is huge, though.
Ouch.
Jeez.
all right. Get him down to the tracking room. You, check that rock to see if he's done anything.
Ben might have to regenerate, too.
Sure.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Other than his backside, was Hartnell even in that one? Didn't he pass out in the previous one, or did he pass out at the beginning of this one?
I think he passed out in this episode. I'm not even sure if that was him, though. They might have gotten his voice later. I hope there's a better explanation. Well, I hope he does something in the next episode. It's his last one, you know? Yeah, for the first Cybermen episode, they're really not featured that much.
It's shot down with their own weapons.
Yeah, like, they didn't do that much. Honestly, I feel like General Cutler is more of a antagonist than the Cybermen are. So I'm also confused, well, about many things that are happening. But I mean, like, okay, so Mondas, that we've established is already weird. So not only is it draining energy from Earth, but the Doctor thinks that it's going to accidentally drain too much energy, which somehow won't kill Earth, but will instead overload Mondas, and it will destroy itself.
Think of it this way. If you were to overcharge a battery, the battery would short circuit or explode even. So he's thinking that the more energy they take, they might short circuit themselves, in which case everything would return to normal. Although what they're going to do with the extra planet, I don't know.
I kind of figured that, like, if it is short circuited, that Mondas will just explode on its own.
But at that close range, that would do some serious damage to the Earth, one would think.
Well, so would sending the bomb. Now, the only thing I would think, though, is that even if Mondas exploded on its own, it would be similar to the Z-bomb exploding, just maybe without the actual radiation from the bomb. So it's just an odd, like, alternative. Like, I guess either way, Mondas is going to explode.
We certainly get that impression.
Yeah, it's a very weird story. So, which, I mean...
And a weird thought here. Perhaps draining the Doctor's energy is what ultimately overloads it, but then causes his regeneration.
Oh, maybe it's accidentally drawing energy from him as well as the Earth, and that would make sense, because it's like, well, because also it's like, okay, Mondas has run out of energy, but somehow its twin planet hasn't, and you're going to just take the charge, but that's going to overload. There's so many questions you could bring up, but that would be interesting if, like, the reason that it short circuits is because it takes the Doctor's energy, and it just takes so much that it does force his regeneration. That would explain why he just passes out. Because honestly, you know, Hartnell's performance the past, you know, season, basically, hasn't changed too much. No. Like, you know, he flubs a line every so often, but he kind of always did that, and kind of everyone does that, really.
Yeah.
You know, it's the most noticeable in him, probably because he's the main character. So, honestly, his performance hasn't been too different, you know? So, that could be a good explanation, because otherwise, he's really just... there's no build-up whatsoever to him regenerating.
Yeah.
So
far. But we have one more episode to go.
One more episode. Maybe they will explain that it's like, oh, well, the planet accidentally took energy from me, you know?
What happened to you, Doctor?
Oh, I'm not sure, my dear. Counts of an outside influence. Unless this little body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
What do you mean wearing a bit thin?
Oh, very child, don't worry.
Brighten up like a sun and then darken again.
He cannot absorb much more energy.
Sir, Cyberman station's on approach path.
Shut up, will you? Go ahead, son.
Hey, control's gone again.
So they literally just needed to wait 5 more seconds.
Silence! Anyone who moves will be killed instantly.
Forgot about their voices.
Your planet is finished. It will disintegrate. We know why you came here. So why not stay and live with us in peace?
We will confirm. Keep your places. Anyone who moves will be killed instantly.
I did not think they were going to try to live peacefully.
And General Cutler, there have been mass landings of Cybermen in many parts of the world. Who are you? I am now controller of the Earth. Resist us and you die.
Ben, Barclay, do not help them!
They're going to use us as bomb.
destroy the Earth!
Surely that?
Oh,
it all makes sense now.
Ooh, that was a blast. It's not futile, but it's useless.
Mondes! Fantastic. It looks as if it's melting. It's falling to bits.
The end of Mondes.
So not
Hey, look.
an explosion, it should break in itself.
They must have been entirely dependent on power from Mondes.
That's
Get
weird.
that! Get that! No Captain Zeus 5.
I guess it's like
Read you
the
loud and clear.
Daleks in the first serial, they need the thing.
The Cybermen menace has ended all over the world. Let me have a full report as soon as you can.
I think that's how the Phantom Menace ends, by the way. They's a broken. Controls are going nuts. Wow, that just happens.
And he didn't seem to let them in, so how did they get in?
Well, the TARDIS controls were going nuts,
Yeah.
so... Alright. I was curious if they were actually going to put Patrick Troughton in there, but no.
Yeah.
Okay, that, Regeneration.
Sort of.
Well, it's gonna be a while before they call it a regeneration,
Yeah.
but... Yeah, wow, that just happens.
Yeah.
And I guess we'll get some explanation next episode, but, this is just nothing, not even a... You know, like I figured at the very least they would go in and he'd be like, "Don't worry, everything will be fine," and then he regenerates. But no, they walk in, he's out, and then the change happens. Episode is over. That is very quick, man. If you don't know about that, like if you were a kid in the '60s and you didn't know about that, that's just got to be the weirdest thing. So, and it makes sense because that was a very odd episode. Just overall, for the introduction of the Cybermen, it was just sort of, that happened.
Well, aside from the fact that they didn't look all that menacing,
Nah.
it was, in my opinion, somewhat hampered by the fact that they talk like this,
Well,
which, again, is not menacing. I mean, it's just, here's this race of cybernetic, whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
and they're coming down to take over Earth, and they're not scary. They have a ray gun, which fries people, but other than that, they don't seem to have any physical menace to them, which
Yeah.
is kind of odd.
Yeah, it's like, I guess because they wanted to differentiate them from the Daleks enough, but yeah, I'm not really sure. It's interesting that from this, because obviously, we're also putting on, what we have seen in the future with the Cybermen from, future episodes, but it's interesting that from this episode, they were like, no, let's bring back those guys. Like the Daleks, I get, and everyone went crazy, and they have such a unique and interesting design. This design for them, it's like, okay, we just sort of slapped a bunch of parts onto a silver suit there.
Yeah.
So, and also like the Daleks, it's one of those, like, I'm not sure how they're going to come back. Like, they seem to have all died, and Mondas was destroyed, so not really sure. But yeah, it was. I mean, I guess it's a good episode. It's just so odd. And
yeah, I mean, you can somewhat see that somewhere down the line, somebody said, you know what, the Cybermen was a good idea, poorly executed. Why don't we, redesign them a little bit, make them a little more, a little scarier, a deeper voice, not quite so seriously silly.
Yeah. Because, I mean, they're going to come back, like, relatively soon. That's the first episode of Season 5, is Tomb of the Cybermen. So, we're honestly really close to their second appearance. Yeah. But it's just very, very odd, And
yeah, we can't say disappointing. It's odd. It's not what we expected at all.
Right. I mean, I guess in the same way when we watched the first Dalek episode, and it's like, okay, this is the first Dalek episode, and we know the Daleks from like future episodes, and they're this whole big deal. And then we go back to that first episode, and for the most part, it's caves. Caves. You get a bit of the Thals, these weird hippie dudes in caves, and then. Here's the Daleks. I mean, they're cool enough, but I mean, because that episode just drags on forever. So, I don't know. I feel like nothing happened in this episode. Like, okay, the Cybermen are here, and it's an invasion. Kind of didn't do anything, and then, honestly, it's always weird when it's like, here's an episode where something big is happening. Okay, how do we solve it? It just sort of solves itself.
Yeah, like you said earlier, it seems more like Cutler was the antagonist.
Yeah.
Because, and maybe that was the point. Maybe they're trying to show that there is a certain, at least in fiction, there is a certain strain of military people who cannot seem to understand anything beyond the military solution.
Yeah.
So, maybe that's what they were possibly going for. But it got so bogged down in all this other stuff. The two guys in orbit whose capsule blows up, and then the sun going up, I mean, that had literally nothing to do with the rest of this episode.
Yeah, they just were there, really.
And
I mean, I guess it's sort of, the sun going up gives... I guess it gives Cutler a bit more credit. Like, he's acting so crazy. Well, yeah, but his son is up there. But nothing really happens there. And then at the end, Mondas is destroyed, and his son is still up there and fine. So it's just...
Yeah.
It's just so odd.
All right, and most obvious question that nobody has asked, why are they at the South Pole?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, other than it's a great outdoor setting, why on earth would you put a bomb like the Z-bomb and a tracking station at the South Pole?
Yeah.
I would understand if they put it in Australia or, in the Rocky Mountains, like that one episode of Eccleston that we saw, where they were in, Utah or someplace like that.
Yeah.
Someplace remote, I understand. But there are so many things wrong about the South Pole, not the least of which it is so cold there that literally rockets would not operate efficiently there because it is the propellant would freeze, everything, the winds, the whole, I mean, you saw the wind were blowing, howling constantly there.
Yeah.
That would knock a rocket off of its course. It's one of the reasons why, like right now, we're waiting for the new SpaceX to go up. It's supposed to go up last week. It may be going up right about now. But again, just because there's winds in Florida, they have to say, hey, wait a minute, we can't launch because if the winds are over X miles an hour, it could throw the entire rocket off course. So I mean, just it makes no sense to have put it there at the South Pole.
Right, and it's not just that, this is where the bomb is. Like, no, this seems to just be where rockets are launched from, is the South Pole. And you're right, there's no reason. It's like, no, it's just the South Pole. We just needed a different location. We haven't had snow in a while, is the only thing. Because, like, there's nothing... It also feels like it would be harder to have a rocket orbit from the South Pole. Because, like, I would figure if you're going for an orbit, you would want to be closer to the equator. And Florida, at the very least, Florida is the southernmost tip of the United States.
And in fact, that's the reason why... we've launched from Florida is because it is closest to the equator, although we could theoretically launch from Hawaii now. But, Hawaii was just barely a state by 1966. I mean, Jules Verne, when he did either First Men in the Moon or H.G. Wells, one of those guys predicted in the early or mid 1800s that in order to fire a rocket that could circle the Earth, you'd need to do it from somewhere closer to the equator. The French have a place in South America, French Guiana or Suriname, whatever it's called now. That's where they launch theirs. And so the closer you are to the equator, you're right, the absolute better it would be. So the worst place to do it would be at the South Pole.
Right, because you're at the South Pole. That means you have to go back all the way, half up the planet, and then start circling, and then somehow get back. It just is very odd.
Okay, well, let's set aside the science, and let's get down to the notes of the silliness of this episode. It's not at all what I expected.
Yeah, and I mean, again, we kind of knew going in there would be no pomp and circumstance about, this is the final episode with Hartnell. This is the end of the first Doctor's era. And none of that. We kind of knew. It's like, okay, it's just going to sort of happen. And apparently, that's just how it goes for the rest of classic Doctor Who. It's not until Eccleston in the modern era that it's like, no, we need to take some time and really acknowledge this actor leaving. And sometimes for other Doctors, they'll go through entire arcs where they resist regenerating.
Yeah.
So
now, I will say this: I don't think this is the director's fault. The director did a lot of mood lighting and the setting of the characters and the whole thing. It was very scientific, very science fiction sort of stuff. This all to me comes down to the writers. It's just it's a very weak storyline. It has a whole bunch of action that is non-action in furtherance of the plot, and then at the end with no explanation, not even a draining energy from me or anything. It's just the Doctor stumbles back to the TARDIS, falls over and goes poof, and he's Patrick Troughton.
Yeah, that's the weirdest thing, because obviously he goes in, the TARDIS is freaking out while he's in there. They barely get in, and by the time they get in, he is already passed out on the floor, and the last thing you just see is the transition between Hartnell to Troughton, end of episode. I figured it would be, the transition, he kind of opens his eyes, maybe he's a bit disoriented, but he gets up and it's like, oh, well, I'm glad that's over. Maybe he starts to go, they're confused, and maybe he gives a little bit of an explanation. It's like, oh, well, I'm worn out, so I had to renew my body. And then there's a tease for next episode, and then you go. That, it's like, okay, there's not a whole lot there. It's not as huge or bombastic as, modern Doctor Who, but it's just something. He didn't even really get a final line. He's just out and the episode's over. Come back next week to figure out what on earth just happened.
Yeah, and I mean, when was it when Susan left, when he gave that great speech about one of these days I'll come back?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he needed something like that. And
yeah.
It's not like there wasn't plenty of time. I mean, Ben and Polly, after the Doctor walks out of the spaceship, and they're looking around going, oh, what was that all about? They could have easily cut 40 seconds so that Hartnell could have had one last something.
Just something, even if it's just anything, one final line to be like, oh, well, don't worry, everything will be fine. I need to do this real quick, and then something.
Even if he was just talking to the TARDIS, don't worry. He's trying to calm it down, just saying everything will be fine.
Yeah, because obviously, at this point, they hadn't thought out regenerations really, and they haven't even really. I don't even know if they've really thought out the Time Lords too much. They probably have a little bit of an idea. But of course, we've gone through so many producers that who knows, if anyone's really keeping track of all this. Okay, maybe they have a vague idea of what they want to do with the Doctor later. And obviously they did have the monk. And okay, so it's something, his people, something with the TARDIS. And it's like, okay. But they barely have anything about regeneration done yet. All they have is, we needed to switch out the actors. But it's just, I don't know. That's just so odd. No lines, regen, end of episode, and that's it. Okay then.
Well, we'll certainly pick this up next week when Troughton opens his eyes and says hello.
I have to imagine they're going to give some explanation next episode, oh, well, and obviously it'll probably be, funnier because Troughton is funnier, So, I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay, now I didn't write this on any of my notes, but I did think this. So, do you think on Mondas it's called the Upback instead of the Outback? Or the Inback for Upside Down Australia?
I don't.
Because they had one shot and I saw Australia just at the top and I was like, I wonder if it's a different name. Dumb little thought, but I just had
Not
that.
Down Under.
Yeah. It's up over back in Mondas, Australia.
That's so much harder to rhyme, though. The thunder from Down Under. Vegemite makes you chunder.
Anyway. So, now into the actual notes.
Yeah, let's do this.
Now into the actual... Of course, the first thing I wrote down is the South Pole, but we don't have an explanation. They just were at the South Pole. I mean, it's cool. The set was really nice. When they went outside and it's like, okay, here's a lot of you can honestly feel the cold, even though it's this is obviously a set and there's just a couple guys off screen with bags of soap or whatever. But I mean, it did look pretty good. Yes. So, let's see. The 10th planet. Again, we don't really have much explanation of that. I feel like this entire episode is just missing one or two extra explanations from the Doctor. And maybe they just didn't write them in because Hartnell was already, on his way out the door. I don't know. It just seems like we needed a couple more explanations that only the Doctor could give, and we just didn't get that.
And again, that's the writer's fault more than anything.
Yeah, it is. So yeah, the 10th planet, Mondas. Again, the whole backstory of it's the twin planet to Earth. Okay. Now, to kind of jump ahead a bit, there is a 10th Doctor episode where they actually showed the origins of the Earth, where basically, the Doctor finds out that, okay, there's something at the core of the Earth, and he actually goes back in time, and he's like, okay, what was that first rock that gathered everything into the Earth? Turns out it's a spaceship for giant spider people. Anyway, but that all contains itself and becomes the Earth with those spiders at the core that are kind of coming out in modern day. It's Christmas. There's a whole thing. Anyway, so I'm now curious how Mondas fits into that if it's supposed to be the twin planets.
Well, now, again, I'm pretty sure this is a 60s science fiction film where we got our first spaceship to travel outside of Earth's orbit. And what happened was they found out that because of where Earth was in its orbit around the sun, they were able to look on the far side of the sun and realize that there was an identical Earth, which we had never seen before because it was in a completely synchronous orbit. And so the second Earth was a doppelganger, and I can't remember what the name of the film was. We can look it up, or I'm sure somebody will tell us. Yeah. But yeah, the astronaut or the astronauts, I can't remember, but they managed to go to the other planet and realize it's literally a mirror image of Earth. But we've never seen it before because it's completely on the opposite side of the sun.
That's interesting. And again, like I said, there was a Jimmy Neutron episode where it's I don't remember what this episode was. I haven't watched Jimmy Neutron in years, but it was some sort of evil Earth where it was exactly the same, but there were evil doppelgangers of everyone, and Jimmy somehow got over there. So it kind of reminded me of that. So, yeah. I mean, it's kind of
there's also the Star Trek episode where they go to the opposite dimension and everybody is, Romulans or something like that, and Kirk is an evil Romulan lord, and Spock has to overthrow him. And
the Mirror Universe.
Mirror Universe, yeah.
So, yeah. So it's an interesting concept just having this twin planet, but again, they just don't really explain how it works. Yeah. And it's so strange.
Now, again, they might have simply been expecting that the audience would simply go along with the action, but again, nobody would have watched it like we did all in one sitting. And maybe over 4 weeks, you wouldn't have noticed this as much. But I have to say, any adult watching this would have immediately gone, wait a minute, why the South Pole? That makes no sense. Or, okay, I understand the concept of a 10th planet, but how did it slip away, and then how did it get back? It's
one day it started drifting away. Why? that sounds like we need to work on that first.
And it seems to me if they were powering it back to Earth, that was taking up a whole lot of energy, which is the one thing they didn't have a surplus of, because they were coming to Earth to steal the Earth's energy.
Was it like maybe they were thinking like how the Daleks, they wanted to take over the Earth and use it as a ship, which we're still not sure how that works, but that's all right. So maybe it's like that. It's like, oh, well, the Cybermen figured out how to pilot Mondas back to Earth, so could you not find another power source for it, but instead you brought it to Earth to drain its power, and then again the Doctor figured out that, well, taking the Earth's energy is actually going to short-circuit Mondas, and then it explodes. Which, again, I don't get that. How does the Earth have so much more energy than Mondas after all this time? And
again, a planet exploding that close to Earth would do some serious damage to the Earth. I mean, even if the pieces never came to the Earth, the shockwave itself should do some serious damage to the Earth.
Yeah, because it's close enough. Those rockets were just in orbit around Earth, but they were being affected by Mondas because it was so close. So, this is something.
I think perhaps we should, because we're never. I mean, this is one of those ones we're never going to figure it out. So we should probably just, maybe somebody in the comments can enlighten us on this. But I mean, this is one of those circular arguments. Every time we bring up something else and try to answer it, it just brings up another question that we can't answer.
And probably the best part is, we know the show is never going to address it, because we have watched at least 2 Cybermen stories. We watched the next one. That was was the first Second Doctor episode that we watched, and it's not brought up there. Very curious how the Cybermen are there now. Like, we're definitely going to need to rewatch that episode and figure some things out there. And then we also watched Earthshock, that also featured the Cybermen. And again, Mondas is just not brought up. I don't even think the Doctor mentions Mondas at all. So it's like, I'll be very curious. Like, did they just never reference Mondas again? Like, where do these other Cybermen come from? Maybe they don't. I don't know.
All right, we're into a whole, which came first, the chicken or the egg argument here.
Yeah.
So let's just...
Okay.
Let's move on.
Let's see. I mean, that has to skip over a couple notes. The Cybermen's design was kind of interesting. Like, I mean, I guess I can understand why they would bring back the Cybermen and just sort of, update it, maybe scale it down a bit, try to fix the design. Because it does seem, I don't want to say simple, but, I mean, considering, like, all the aliens that we've had, and, like, these definitely feel like, okay, if we needed to bring back robots, like, obviously we have the Daleks if we need to, but it's between, like, the Cybermen and the War Machines, and those War Machines were ridiculously big. So it's like, okay, let's bring back the Cybermen. Like, I could understand that.
And again, the initial concept, the idea that it's an android humanoid type body with what appears to be certain cybernetic parts, but why the gigantic thing on the head, which never seemed to do anything?
Yeah, it's like the spotlight that they had connected to their head. Because, like, I remember, though, that at least in the next one, in Tomb of the Cybermen, it's like they still have that sort of, look, but it's a lot more slimmed down, basically. Yeah. It's basically just sort of a square on their heads. So, I'm not sure.
Is the Cybermen the one where Adric goes back in time?
Yes.
Okay, so if he's going back in time, this is, again, tying back into the beginnings of the Earth and all of that. So,
if he went back in time, would he have found... Was Mondas there? Like, when the spaceship collided with the Earth? That's a great question. I don't know.
No. I mean, go on. Move on.
We really cannot think too much about Mondas.
Nothing to see here, folks. Move along.
Yeah, I'm sure it's explained in audios. So, I would just like...
my brain hurts.
At the very least, I just want to know how the Doctor knows about them.
Yes.
Because we never get that either.
He never said a word about how he knew them.
I feel like this needed like 2 more episodes and more Doctor. Like that. I feel like that's the biggest problem here. So
it makes you wonder. Those 2 were completely new writers. I mean, here we are at the beginning of the 4th season. Yeah. You're bringing on new writers who obviously either haven't watched it before or have decided to simply jettison everything that they've seen and start something. But the problem is, of course, it doesn't follow. It's a non sequitur.
Yeah, it's so
nothing
very
makes
odd.
sense.
Okay, let's see. Interplanetary War, which I guess this is the earliest. We had the Dalek invasion of Earth, but that was like the 2100s. Like, I guess this technically is the earliest that we've had like the Earth knowing about aliens, which is kind of interesting. Because honestly, I think actually the War Machines was like the first episode that was just like, no, this is in the 60s. This is in 1966. This is just a Doctor Who story that's on Earth in the present time, which, they do that a lot like in the modern era and stuff, but we haven't had that mainly because for a lot of, like the first 2 seasons, we couldn't do that because that would mean we would have to leave Ian and Barbara. And then after that, we just really didn't have it, with the only exception to that being the Christmas episode in the middle of the Daleks' master plan. So yeah, this one is, it's just one of those classic stories, which is interesting. Of course, this is still 1986, so I'm trying to think. I don't know if Doctor Who was still on in 1986. It may have been canceled by then.
Well, that would have been like the 23rd season.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they go up to 26 seasons overall, so yeah, maybe they were. I'd be curious. That'd be around, well, I guess it'd be towards the end of the 6th Doctor, so it'd be interesting if that sort of came back.
Is that Davidson? 6?
No, that's Colin Baker.
Okay.
I remembered Baker, and I was like, wait, that's not specific enough. So yeah. Let's see. The Z-bomb, I feel like there would need to be a lot more clearance to launch that thing. Like, yeah. And I guess, well, Cutler was taking over and taking it into his own hands.
But even so, there are safeguards in place to prevent a military launch without civilian control over it. And the guy at International Space Command or whatever it was said, no, you can't do it. And
so Geneva.
Geneva is the... basically, it's like in Marvel with the Winter Soldier thing. Yeah. Geneva is the spot worldwide which is considered to be neutral. So, that makes perfect sense. I mean, the Geneva Conventions are basically the rules of war and that sort of thing. So, but the big thing is, yes, that Cutler should not have been able to launch the bomb without some kind of dual control, that he has one and the guy in Geneva has one.
Yeah, that seemed very strange. Well, and just too, because it's like, okay, I guess I understand the Doomsday device, basically the Doomsday weapon, but I always thought, and I guess this is sort of my lack of knowledge on like the Cold War and everything, but it's like I thought it was more that like, it's like, okay, well, let's say the United States has X amount of nuclear devices, and the USSR had a certain number, but either way, whoever launches one first, they all get launched, and that's what destroys the Earth. Whereas in this, it's like, there's just one thing that one guy can launch and blow up the entirety of Mondas.
That's the difference between the film War Games and the film Dr. Strangelove, because in Dr. Strangelove, the Russians invent a doomsday device, which says if a single warhead is detonated somewhere over Russia, it will essentially fire off all the missiles. So the idea being, again, that no one will ever strike the Soviet Union first because it would activate the doomsday device. Then what they don't understand is what happens if the attack is a mistake. And that's what happens in Dr. Strangelove. They launch a group of bombers, not missiles, and although they recall 5 of the 6 in the wing, one of them actually gets through, and they're going, oh, wait a minute, you can't do this because we have a doomsday device. And why would you build a doomsday device? Well, because we never thought anybody would actually try to attack us. We're not trying to attack you. This is a mistake. Well, we don't know how to stop it. So, and then, of course, at the end, spoiler alert, don't want to spoil it for you because you need to watch the film. Some very bad thing happens while a woman sings, "We'll meet again." Don't know where, don't know when, but we'll meet again some sunny day.
So, note to self, we clearly need to react to this.
Yes.
So.
Doctor Strange, one of the funniest films. I know it sounds weird, but Peter Sellers, great British actor, is 3 of the main characters in the film. He's President Merkin Muffley of the United States, and he's a British commander who is trying to stop the man who launched the bombers in the first place. And then he's somebody else. I can't remember who else he is. But Peter Sellers did that quite often. Again, wonderful film called The Mouse That Roared. We'll have to watch all of these at some point. So anyway, but if you get a chance, Dr. Strangelove, great film.
Let's see.
He plays Dr. Strangelove.
I was wondering. It's like, okay, you brought him up. I assume he plays Dr. Strangelove then.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I wrote down worn out, but again, not really an explanation for that. I mean, if you're just watching this and you don't know... Well, I mean, even if you know that Troughton is coming up, you have probably in the 60s, no one knew how it was going to happen or why. So when the Doctor's just kind of out for an episode, let's be honest, he kind of just does that sometimes. You know, the first Doctor has never been like the most physically able Doctor, and there have been plenty of episodes where he is just sort of out. You know, if Hartnell has a vacation, he's just sort of written out of the episode. So when he says like, "Oh, this old body is worn out," it's like, yeah, but you've always been worn out. So what's the difference today?
Yeah, again, it all goes back to the writing.
Yeah, it's like, because that's the thing. If he said like, "Oh, you know, the Mondas is accidentally draining energy from me," okay, something is clearly different. So then, even if you want to go with he doesn't get any final words, he just regenerates, end of episode, you can at least have like, oh, he said his energy was drained. Okay, so something, that's why this seems to happen, whatever this is, and we'll find out more next episode. But just none of that.
Yeah.
This, maybe not the best idea to bring in a new writer for the actor's final episode.
Yeah.
So...
who's that? Well, they wouldn't have gotten Luca Rotti because he was one of the guys who wrote the historicals. Spooner, Dennis Spooner.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody who could have given Hartnell the farewell that he deserved.
Yeah, which I mean, but I guess that's the thing is, whoever is in charge right now, we don't really know like what their relationship to Hartnell was at this point. Maybe they thought he doesn't deserve any sort of send-off.
You'd think Sidney Newman would have said, "Hey, come on, give him." I mean, again, that speech that he gave when Susan left. That's the one that, I mean, that's the gold standard.
I mean, even the small speech he gave when the first time Stephen left, and he was all alone. That was a really good speech too. It's like, just anything, even just a couple lines, Now, I do remember in An Adventure in Space and Time, when Hartnell looks over and he sees Matt Smith. Matt Smith actually does sort of mess with the controls on the TARDIS a bit, which I think is in reference to here, where the TARDIS is freaking out and flipping every sort of switch. So, so that's pretty cool. Let's see. The Doctor did try to be like, hey, your world is going to be destroyed one way or another. Why don't you just live with the humans peacefully? Which is an interesting idea he put forward that they didn't talk about, but, it was interesting. I mean, just for the fact that, we already said, like, oh, well, the Cybermen are saying your planet is going to die, but you can come live on Mondas so long as you be like us. So I like the Doctor sort of throwing it back at them, like, well, hey, your planet is going to die, but you can live with the humans. But just live peacefully, just coexist as two different species, basically. But, and then they didn't really go anywhere with that, but whatever.
Well, at least he offered.
Yeah, it was an interesting idea, at least. I guess there was a whole thing about destroying Earth. I'm not sure what that was about. It kind of seemed, I guess it was like the Cybermen were going to use the Z-bomb to destroy Earth. I don't fully remember why exactly. It's a little hard to hear in this episode. Yeah. Well, not only because, the aliens not being able to speak very clearly. I mean, that's sort of par for the course on this, but this episode was very weirdly mixed with the audio. Like some parts were way too loud, some parts were way too quiet, and there was a lot of times where it's like people were talking over each other, and it's like, I can't understand what I need to.
And this is a very strange little visual thing, but of course, being an older person, I suffer from this. when you can't see the Cyberman's mouth,
Yeah.
so that you cannot see the words, you can't see what they're enunciating. When he just suddenly his mouth is open, he's going, you will do what we say, but the mouth doesn't move. That is very difficult. It's not that I'm a lip reader or anything, but if I've got my back turned and people talk to me, I will sometimes have to turn around and say, hey, wait a minute, can you say that again? Because I cannot process it without seeing their mouth moving. So,
well, I will go ahead and say the way that we are going to be watching Doctor Who Classic is possibly going to change a little bit, and I'm going to see if I can get us subtitles from now on.
Oh, okay.
So, pretty much our entire run, we have not had subtitles, and especially like during the recons, that would be helpful. Although I don't know if I can get subtitles on recons. That would be quite the trick. But I'm gonna see if I can get subtitles just in general. Yeah. So, because I mean, I enjoyed the subtitles too. Like, when we watch movies and stuff, or I mean, even when I react to movies here on the channel, I'm turning the subs on.
Yeah.
So
and again, for example, like when we went to see Avengers: Infinity War and Endgame, it was great to see it in the theater, but there's so many explosions and so much music that it's very hard to understand every word. Yeah. And when we saw it at home and turned the subtitles on, it's like, oh, that makes so much more sense now. Yeah. Because you're not hearing, kaboom and then missing out what somebody's saying.
Well, and also, because when we saw Endgame, it was in the IMAX theater. Don't go to IMAX. IMAX is a mistake. The seats are great, or maybe it's not IMAX specifically. Maybe it's like the Dolby Cinema or whatever that AMC had. Which, I mean, don't go to movies anyway right now. This is not the time for that. But it was the Dolby Cinema where they had, complete surround sound, and it was just not good. On the slight spoilers, I guess, for Endgame, when all the Avengers are there and Cap says, Avengers, and it pauses and he says, assemble. I did not hear Avengers because the music was going crazy and everything, but everything just paused so he could say, assemble. I was like, oh, so he must have said Avengers. And I was like, well, that ruins the moment. So, don't go to the Dolby. It's not good enough. Just wait. It'll come out on streaming and stuff. Just watch it then, honestly. Let's see. The radiation, that just sort of happened. The Cybermen couldn't handle the radiation, which, I mean, I guess it's I guess it's sort of the same as a human's reaction to radiation. They just don't have a giant suit for them to use.
And those were not radiation suits. I'm sorry.
No, they had they just had a face shield, but it wasn't connected. Yeah. It was
I mean, very few people in the 60s probably would have known that. But but I mean, even in one of the very first James Bond films, Dr. No, they had radiation suits that were 100% contained. So
I guess it's sort of a bit more of a nitpick than anything else, but still. Let's see. The cyber power. So they were getting power from Mondas. I don't know how that works.
Microwavable. Who knows?
But we obviously don't know how Mondas works in general. So I mean, it's sort of like the Daleks, where in the first serial, it's like, okay, well, they get their power from the static electricity of the floor, so they just had to get them onto a rug, and suddenly a Dalek doesn't work. So I guess it's same concept. Yeah. It's just weird.
But at the end, when whatever it is, the power disappears, why did they melt? I would understand them just dying because they no longer had a heartbeat or anything like that. But why did they then also have to melt? That made no sense.
Yeah. And then I guess the last thing I wrote down is regeneration, or I think they'll call it renewal. But still. And again, we can't really talk about it too much because it just happens, It's like, and I get, maybe because they've sort of warmed it, they've sort of warmed us up to it. Like they were trying to warm us up to it. It's like, oh, Vicky, she just suddenly left. Steven, Dodo, they just suddenly left. But I thought we'd get a bit more for the Doctor, this guy we've had for over 3 seasons now. Yeah. So he's just no lines. Ben and Polly get in, and he's already passed out. He changes, doesn't even open his eyes. Come back next week. Okay.
Although I would imagine, if kids were watching that, their biggest question is, what the heck just happened? What's going on?
Yeah.
And that would, of course, make them tune in the next week. But still...
Yeah, so... That was just all sorts of weird... Okay, we can kind of do...
That has to be the understatement. All sorts of weird.
Yeah. I mean, we can kind of do a slight retrospective. Okay. If we were to say, what was the best episode of the First Doctor's era? So, yeah, I guess because we're on our schedule, so we'll kind of work backwards a bit. 10th Planet, Smugglers, War Machines, Savages, The Gunfighters, The Celestial Toymaker, The Ark, The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, The Daleks' Master Plan, all of that, The Myth Makers, Galaxy 4, The Time Meddler takes us back to Season 2. Everything's out of okay. The Chase, The Space Museum, The Crusade, The Web Planet, The Romans, The Rescue takes us through most of Season 2. Okay, let's see. The Dalek Invasion of Earth, Planet of Giants, The Reign of Terror, The Sensorites, The Aztecs, The Keys of Marinus, Marco Polo, The Edge of Destruction, The Daleks, and An Unearthly Child. What do you think was the best? I could probably also just bring up the playlist, which would probably be easier to see. Which one is it? There it is. Okay. So many playlists. Okay. So, and we could slightly zoom that in just.
Oh, but that's...
Yeah.
See, that's everything that we did. We started with Unearthly Child, but then you're going to have to scroll way down to, I guess...
Yeah. All the way past all that stuff. Okay, so... Yeah, Marco Polo.
I love Marco Polo.
Keys of Marinus.
Didn't care for Keys of Marinus at all.
Aztecs.
Love the Aztecs.
The Sensorites. It was okay.
Okay, but
The Reign of Terror.
I like that a lot. Again, I'm obviously a fan of the historicals.
Yeah. Planet of Giants.
I like the Planet of Giants. I thought it was very well done.
That was a fun one. The Dalek Invasion of Earth.
Yeah, not too bad, but again, didn't feel like it lived up to what its potential, what it should have been.
Yeah. The Dalek Invasion of Earth movie.
Not worth the celluloid that it was printed on.
Yeah. The Rescue.
What was The Rescue?
That's where they met Vicky.
Oh, okay.
There's only 2 parts.
Well, again, for acquiring Vicky, it was pretty good. The rest of it was pretty silly.
Yeah. The Romans.
Love the Romans.
The Web Planet.
You know I love the Web Planet, even though most people didn't.
Yeah. The Crusade.
Love the Crusade.
The Space Museum.
Again, interesting premise. Didn't really care for it that much.
Yeah. The Chase. Got a little goofy, but it was alright.
Yeah.
The Time Meddler.
Love the Time Meddler.
Yeah. Good introduction to the monk. I'm very curious if he's ever going to come back now. Galaxy 4. That one just sort of happened.
Can't even remember what that one is about.
Well, it had the Chumbleys.
Oh, the Chumbleys. Okay,
yeah.
Well, now that one had a really good premise, but wasn't that one completely in recons?
I think so.
Yeah. So
or at least mostly.
Yeah, I think if we'd been able to see it in live action, it probably would have been better. It suffered a little from that. But again, great premise, the idea of you got all these blonde Nordic type women who turn out to be complete horrible people, and then the gigantic blobbly squids and the Chumbleys who turn out to be the nice people. So, okay. Yeah, I like that one.
Which I should go ahead and just, for one last time, we'll throw a Chumbley across the screen. So,
hi, Chumbley.
Yeah. Alrighty. Mission to the Unknown.
Interesting, especially for the reconstruction of it.
Yeah, a good setup at least.
Yeah.
The Myth Makers.
That's the one in ancient Greece?
Yes.
Yeah, again, interesting idea of the Doctor, like with the Romans, accidentally giving Nero the idea to burn Rome down, and here he realizes he has to give them the idea of the Trojan horse, or history will not play out the way it's supposed to. So
right. Then we had the Daleks' Master Plan.
No.
Parts 1 through 12.
Parts 1 through 12. 6 of them could have been jettisoned.
Yeah,
and you and I started out with what we thought was going to be a brilliant dissection or dissertation of World War II, and then it just turned into oatmeal.
Yeah, it was an interesting premise. Kind of lost it during the Christmas episode, And then we had, and then it just sort of fizzled out. Like, it wasn't really bad after that, but it wasn't great either. It just sort of happened after that.
Very disappointing.
Yeah.
Considering where it started, it was very disappointing.
Yeah. The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve.
Again, that one could have been better because the doctor disappeared in the middle of it and we didn't figure out why, and he came back, we thought, as another character, but then it turns out it wasn't him.
Yeah.
And so, again, what was nice about that one is it set up the fact that Stephen said, hey, you had the opportunity to prevent some really horrible stuff, and the doctor said, you don't understand, I can't do that. Stephen tries to leave, and then says, wait a minute, comes right back.
Could have been a really great exit for Stephen, honestly, and I guess it does sort of set up maybe a bit of a character arc for the Doctor, at least. Yeah. So the ending was interesting, I guess. The arc, that one was fun.
Yeah. Again, the idea of revisiting the same place 700 years later seemed kind of interesting.
Yeah. The Celestial Toymaker.
The absolute worst. I think even if we had seen it in its full live action, just the idea of doing those kind of games to set up some kind of tension did not work on the small screen. I mean, it's hard enough to do it with special effects on the big screen, but it was poorly conceived and even worse executed.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of like this one, where it's like, I feel like this would be a lot better if they actually wrote the Doctor in it, because, and this one I can give it a bit more of a pass, and it was still kind of interesting, if just kind of weird. But yeah, it's like, I think the biggest problem with the Celestial Toymaker is that it just does not feature the Doctor, because that was their first attempt at trying to get rid of him. Yeah. So, let's see. The Gunfighters.
We love the Gunfighters. Now, we know it was silly.
Yeah.
But, the fact that you've got them interacting, knowing what has to happen, going on, things like that, and yet still managing to throw some tongue-in-cheek stuff in there. And yes, the song was maddening. We all agree. Everybody agrees the song was absolutely maddening. But again, I thought the Gunfighters was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Good comedy for Hartnell, too.
Yeah.
Which you don't really get a lot of... I mean, you get some, but not a ton of comedy for the first Doctor. Yeah. So, the Savages...
again, seem to be a little bit labored.
Yeah. We're at the end of the playlist, but after that was the War Machines.
Okay, but, nothing special.
Yeah, horrible send-off for Dodo, at the very least. But it's like, interesting idea, just sort of just fizzled out.
And again, I really like Ben and Polly. I mean, after all, Ben is a military man, so he does bring something to the table. And although they haven't quite used it yet, again, Polly is not just a secretary. And when she said, hey, maybe I can make some coffee, the idea I thought behind there was she's going to make the coffee and then sit down with the scientists and go, we got to figure out a way here to keep him from doing that yet. But again, she just seemed to be making coffee. So they're wasting the premise of Polly at this point.
Yeah. I hope we're not, like, building her up too much in our heads, because we do sort of have that idea, and it's, at the very least, it's in the back of our heads, whenever she does anything, and it's like, are they going to do that or are they not? And if they don't, then it's like, oh, we just kind of hyped her up for nothing.
Well, see, the problem is, though, they've set us up for that, because we got Barbara, and then we got Vicky, because Vicky wasn't a normal kid. She was from the future. You had 12 PhDs and everything. So we kind of get the idea that the female companion is going to actually, again, bring something to the table, rather than like Susan being the damsel in distress. So I certainly don't want to see Polly become the damsel in distress. I'm hoping when we see her in the second Doctor that she'll develop into somebody, because right now they've set us up that she's going to be another Barbara or another Vicky, and so far she's not.
Right. Then we had last episode, the Smugglers.
I like the Smugglers quite a lot, even though, again, it was a historical without being a historical.
Yeah.
It didn't involve anybody or any major plot point in history, but it was fun, because you had a very certain time period, and they all fit into it very well, and managed to put things straight, and then got out.
Yeah.
Which is what a good time travel story is supposed to do.
Yeah. And wrapping everything up is the 10th planet.
Uh-huh.
Which is, okay, I would say it's probably maybe one of the weirder episodes, other than the Christmas episode itself, but I'd probably say this is probably the weirdest serial we've had for the first Doctor. it's not that great. It's also really not bad either. Like, I could see, like, okay, if you fix a couple things here, maybe add in a bit more of the Doctor, get a bit of a better explanation for Mondas, and okay, we could have a pretty decent thing, along with at least a halfway decent send-off for Hartnell, and then, okay, we got a pretty alright episode for his final one. But other than that, it's like, this just sort of happened, it's weird, and now I guess we're just moving on.
It's weak.
Yeah,
it's weak tea. Weak tea, Doctor. Weak tea.
Yeah, it's just so
Well, actually, it's not the Doctor's fault. It's the writer's fault.
Yeah, that's very much on the writers. So yeah, next time we are moving on. I guess we can just sort of pop it up over here. Next time we are moving on to the second Doctor, which we actually have a 6-parter. We're back.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
But I see they are completely animated.
Yes. Okay, so the next one, 6 parts, so obviously we'll break it up into 2 separate episodes. And the next one is completely animated, which is going to be very weird because, even in this episode, I was like, man, this animation is just a little too, it's like stiff and a little too quick, and it's like, okay, it's just very strange, but all right.
But it beats the heck out of the recons.
Yeah. And in fact, good. So for the remainder of season 4, we do not have a complete episode in the slightest. But it looks like only 2 of them are just flat out missing, and we'll just have to use recons.
Is the Highlanders where they pick up Jamie?
Yeah, maybe. I would guess, yeah, because he's a
Highlander.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, are we? Well, wait a minute. Does that mean we're going to lose either Ben or Polly immediately?
I don't.
We just got them.
I don't remember who the girl was when we got Jamie.
It was Victoria, but I'm pretty sure she doesn't come in until right before Tomb of the Cybermen. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll have 3 of them for a while. But I mean, Jamie, I would imagine Jamie's the muscle, which has been a very loose term for a while. Like, okay, Ian was the muscle, though we joke that Barbara was actually the muscle, and then Stephen was definitely muscle. And then now we have Ben, who's kind of muscle. He doesn't really do much, though. Like,
but again, to me, the idea of Ben, and again, we may be reading too much into this, but Ian was a teacher.
Yeah.
All right. Stephen was a guy stranded on a planet with a bunch of mechanoids. What were they called?
Yes, mechanoids.
All right. So they're not used to that. But Ben is an actual sailor. This is a guy who's gone through basic training. Yeah. This is a guy who knows how to defend himself and his crew. So I'm hoping that we'll see a little bit of that.
Yeah, whereas in the Aztecs, they had to go through a whole thing of training Ian to be a warrior. Yeah. It might not need to do too much with Ben.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess there's that. I guess Stephen was kind of... Well, I mean, we thought he was a pilot, but they didn't do anything with that. Yeah. So...
There's nothing for him to fly. He can't fly the TARDIS. And that's the only thing that...
Yeah, even the Doctor can't fly the TARDIS properly. So... I guess that's pretty much that.
That's that.
Next time around, we will start the second Doctor's era. And
what's it called?
Well, see, on our schedule, that's not the full name there. But I know the full name.
Oh, dear. Are they back again?
Are
you trying to hide this from me?
I wasn't going to say anything. but when you did... Earlier in the episode, when you said, "Oh, is it the Daleks?" and I was like, "No, I don't think that's till next episode." So, I think I technically knew that the Cybermen were in this episode. So, but yeah, that's pretty much that. With all that being said,
all that,
we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. If you want to watch more of our Doctor Who Classic reactions, you can click on the playlist, you can subscribe if you haven't done that already, and be sure you hit that notification bell. You can support me on Patreon and follow me on social media, links below in the description. See you guys later.